take a look at it. And the general overview based on looking at the arborist report, looking at pictures and video that they've seen is that at this point the tree is pretty compromised given what's been cut off. But as Carol is speaking to, there were a number of things that could have been done previously in their view to help preserve the tree. And that's our issue kind of going forward, or what we want to support is a more transparent process in terms of, when these heritage, important trees are in need of care, that we have a discussion about it as a community, and that we really look at not just whether they're sick and need to come down, but really how they can be preserved. And the view that who's coming next week happens to be the arborist that ran all, that was the head arborist at Apple, so quite well known and regarded.
Mm-hmm.
And
one of the things that we do in town on other properties where they cut down an oak tree that is alive and good, but they want to move it for some reason. Sometimes we say, no, they can't move it. They have to change their design of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But we ask for replacement trees. And I was wondering whether the town would be willing to get I guess it's the lands of the Packard that the tree is on, or in the road right away.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if the town would then replace this tree, if it has to come down, with another oak further behind, with maybe a nice little plaque that says that, this was planted because of the 30-year, I guess somebody said it was 300 years old.
the arborist report, I think, said between 200 and 300, perhaps.
Yeah.
Here,
I saw that somewhere, 2
Yeah.
to 300 years. I
Years
think that may have been the
somewhere
arborist
in
report.
there that,
We have
would
some
do
ideas
that.
about
Yeah.
exactly the same
So
thing,
that,
actually. Yeah.
that would be my proposal, since it looks like the tree can't be saved, and it may save itself, but maybe we can have
Yeah.
2 oak trees there, but maybe the town would replace it with a significantly large tree.
We have some ideas on that. I appreciate that. Before we get there, so what the arborist that we talked to said that was the case, that they felt that there were things that could have been done to preserve the tree safely. And we want to just reiterate, we're here not just saving all trees that cause issue, but it's really how can we do this, preserve the nature in a healthy way that works for all of us as a community.
And change this process overall. This just isn't about this tree.
And the other point that was made in talking to these arborists was one, that the arborist that was used that did the main report, typically tends to get the answer that's wanted. And our sense is in this case that yes, the tree is right next to the road. It's, the sense is that the town would prefer it. It's just an easier route not to have that tree there.
Or that liability.
Obviously, the tree has been there long before any of us, and long before the road was there paved. So to say that the oak is in the wrong place or a problem place is more our issue as humans.
Was in the wrong
Right.
Correct. So we're having to deal with what's here. But so one, and this particular arborist, as I understand it, is not an accredited consultant. So I don't know about the other two arborists that came and looked at the tree. But there seemed to be, from our perspective, a desire to not preserve that tree, to find a way that we can get rid of it. And the preceding arborist reports, the one, once we had the tree, Steve agreed to pause the tree, but then there was an arborist that came out very quickly without our knowing the next morning and reconfirmed what it seems that the wishes of the town were, that it should come down. And the mayor said it beautifully to us, which was, are we asking the question of these arborists, okay, if it's sick, how do we preserve it, rather than, okay, it's sick, we have to take it down because of it's a liability. So how do we as a community look to really preserve the environment and in our community, and obviously towards a bigger.
I think there's positions open on EDP and the Open Space Committee. We would love to have you or both of you join us.
Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it.
I mean, that's one way to get involved. and bring up the issues and do it. And none of the committees were, I don't think, notified about anything about this.
Mm-hmm.
And so ordinarily, and I know that I have willows and they were in the wires, and I did come into town and ask Steve if I could have them pruned back,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want the neighbors mad at me if their electricity went down or their cable went down, and he said that I can prune them because that's what she wanted us to do, is keeping them out of the wires. So I know that sometimes you don't have to have permits to prune your trees, and these weren't oaks, these are willow trees. So I just really think that we need to be more proactive in town, I think, about notifying the community that what has to be done, whether we can do anything about it, but if everybody, at least the community and Dewey and the group around the tree had been notified, or all of Elena, that you were doing tree removal, that would have helped to prevent the anguish over a tree, because it could have been discussed ahead of time. And then if there's something could have been done to preserve the tree, we could have worked on that, or maybe the road could have been moved over. I doubt whether it could have been, because I think
the
it's
creek
pretty
spreads
narrow
over there, yeah.
there. But I mean, there's other solutions. So my feeling is the best thing for the town to do is always forewarn the citizens, and then you can have the discussion before and know what's going to happen.
And I appreciate that, and I just want to add that, so when the citizens, I became aware of it, I came down here, and I was told the only way that I could stop the company that was cutting, who were very cordial to me and understood, was to get the town. I tried calling, I couldn't get anybody, and I stood out here, and to me, a tree is life. I mean, that is life, and it's like if a child was being stabbed over and over, and I said to the paramedics, come help me, or to the police, they would come. And finally got Steve out here, and I said, unless he's on a call about saving somebody's life, this is more critical. Like, I just need him to stop it so that we can have time. And it took a really long time. In fact, it took for my husband to come down here, because my passion was so strong and emotional, and sometimes men don't hear emotional women, and he wasn't really hearing me. And my husband came, and then he agreed to stop it, and we went and stopped it. But honestly, a lot more limbs were cut off in that period. Yeah. And then by like 11 o'clock, and I have the voicemails on my phone, I received a voicemail on Wednesday when we were told they were going to pause it to give us time to evaluate. I received a call that another arborist had come out, which, by the way, we have not seen that report. I have no idea who even came out. We haven't seen any evidence of it so far. We've asked for it. Haven't seen a lick of it.
You don't have it yet either.
Wow, really?
I thought there was some.
There was a very short paragraph.
You haven't gotten it from that other gentleman.
No, that was the second one.
The third gentleman that came out, he has not provided a report
And
yet.
so, but you started cutting again, so I received a note that they had brought out a third arborist without even notifying us and anybody to even be present when he was there, and that cutting was to proceed. And so then my husband and I went into urgent mode. We emailed Kavita, we emailed all of the town council, we put notices on next door, we put a sign up that night, and I drove by at 7:45 in the morning. I wasn't expecting to see the crane and all the cutting beginning to pick up my daughter, and I was ready to lay down my life for that tree. And I would do it again and again and again. And I spoke very heatedly to Steve, because I've been lied to numerous times by him, and he's actually said things that maybe he believed, like that the arborist called me and things. I have no record. I would enter my phone in for evidence if anybody wants to see it. Things like our sign was removed. You guys have our number. You know how to contact us. There's an email on there. No email was sent to us that our sign, we had to remove it because it's not your property. Okay, I get it. But let us allow to have one of the neighbors put it in their yard, or, something. We have that. And it was just, we were not heard, we were disrespected, we were lied to, and that, whatever. But this is more than me, it's more than my husband, this is a tree, this is our planet, this is what we blow. And Groot, whether you follow the Avengers or not, Groot is a very important symbol in that saga of birth and regrowth and being able to regrow. So I think it's really interesting that Kit brought up the idea of that trees can regrow themselves. And my little niece, who watched this unfold, said, doesn't Groot always regenerate? I said, there'll be another tree. But if we don't stand for this, and I've just, as a resident of Los Altos Hills for 46 years, I am honestly disgusted. Who has lived in oaks my whole life. My parents live, I think you've been in my parents' house.
Mm-hmm.
They live in the most gorgeous oak
grove.
Yeah. And we've lost
Pretty
trees.
dense.
Really dense. We've lost trees. We used just such a gigantic tree that we had to take out, and things, my parents just had to take out a completely dead, what was that one that Juan took out, because it was going to fall in the house. And so we understand when trees need to be cut, but there were so many things that could have been done, even to the point of when I made this an issue on Tuesday. And to me, this is really negligent of the town of Los Altos Hills. This whoever makes this decision. Steve yelled at me when I was here on Tuesday and he said, I make the ultimate decisions. And I said, really? I don't think that's the case. And my husband heard him say that. Do you remember saying that to me?
Yeah, what it was, you asked, who can stop the tree? And I said, I can make that decision. That's the actual, what we were talking about. And I didn't make the decision that got this tree down originally, just so you know that.
No, but you it sounds like to me you did make the decision to bring another arborist out, which you haven't even received the report for, and to start the cutting to commence again.
Yeah, I mean, we decided, staff decided that the tree was a hazard and that we should get it.
Were you involved in this, Carl?
As of Tuesday, let's see, I was out of the office Monday and Tuesday, so yeah, pretty much Wednesday.
So you approved the arborist coming out, and you knew what had happened with
I
me?
knew that the tree work had been stopped. What I do know is that the contractor was hired by Packard Foundation.
Well, so we actually talked to the Packard Foundation, and we talked to Craig at the Packard Foundation, and he also agreed to stop the cutting. And the reason he said okay is because he called him and said, we got another arborist, and so we're just going to go ahead. And so the Packards are trusting the town of Los Altos. I mean, and the Packards, this is the Packard Family Foundation. The Packard family probably doesn't even know any of this is going on. And that's really sad to me, because I grew up with the Packard family, and my next step after we talked to you all was to talk to the Packard Family Foundation.
Well, somehow they hired an arborist, or they hired a tree company to remove the tree.
Was that the request of the town? Let's get the why don't, can you,
Yeah,
you
so
have a timeline
basically
that
what
you
happened
can
is
give it?
so basically the report was done in October last year. I'm not sure, Nicole Bowersox asked for it, because that's what we do. We have somebody study the trees in town, see if there's safety issues or whatever, and they looked at this tree.
So
and
this
then
What
some
is
other
Michelle
trees.
Bowersock's position in the town?
Her name is
Public
Nicole.
Works Director, who
She's not here.
was very efficient.
And so anyway, this was done. Kelty looks at I don't know how many trees, several hundred trees in town. Anyway, so they pinpointed these trees, including this tree, and then there's also some Monterey pines. And anyway, so they do this report, and it was found that there was
Okay,
posted
so,
trees.
and I can go back even further, Steve, one
Oh,
second, and then
yeah,
I'll allow you
sure.
to start up again, but we started an annual windshield survey of trees along roads. And that's because we had a eucalyptus come down in 2006 on top of a bicyclist and killed someone.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, when you say liability, it sounds very abstract, and it's just about writing a check. It's about human life as well. We're talking about life today.
We've never not said that. We've
Okay.
never not said that when I talked to him. We've never not said that that it's safety and preservation together. Public
so
safety.
liability is it's more than money. It is life. So then, very recently in Burlingame, a tree fell down on some people picnicking in a park. And
Right,
it's
yeah, we're
it's
aware.
tragic. Someone's dead. Another person's going to be permanently injured and maimed for life. So it is important, but we've been doing these surveys since 2006 to try to have some idea of the health and condition of the trees along our roadways. The responsibility for maintaining trees, as currently written in the town's ordinance, is that of the abutting property owner. And so usually when we get this survey, then we send notices to the property owners. Hey, you've got some work to do on this tree. There's usually the trees are ranked in terms of their relative, they're scored. And so I believe, and this is the part I don't have the full history on it, this tree apparently was identified as a tree that was in pretty poor, it was declared to be.
We don't
important.
need to debate
Right.
that anymore, even
No,
because we're all in understanding of that.
So I'm just leading you up to where we are today.
Mhm.
And can there be improvements in our process? Can we do better? And that's why I think that's why Carol's saying, hey, we'd like you to join the committee. And if you don't want to join the committee, you can at least, that's usually how, in terms of policy and process, that's how we can amend it and make it better, is we start at the committee level.
I'm sorry, I haven't heard you take any accountability for this tree specifically yet. I'm sorry, I haven't. I've heard you say you could do better, but this was negligent. And yes, I can join a committee and go through all this.
But we didn't know any.
No, you guys weren't advised. And this, what is this? What is this? 12-2.403, heritage tree removal. No person shall purposely damage or purposely cause to die a heritage tree except with the approval of the city council following a noted public hearing. What is that? Is that not, did we pull that from somewhere that wasn't?
Well, Steve, do you want to explain what happened in terms of?
Unfortunately, I don't know anything. I've only been doing this position interimly for like a month and a half, so I didn't know anything about the history of what happened. But all I know is they do take this report to the city council. I'm not sure when that occurred because I didn't do the research on it, but they obviously went to the city council and said, well, here's the report, because I believe they go every year. And so somebody must have said, yes, this tree probably is on the list of, we got to deal with this. And so then they talked to
There must be
Hewlett
council
Packard.
records that we could look up. There's
Yeah.
meetings of all,
In
there's,
favor to Steve, he was doing 3 jobs because everybody
Well, that's fine.
quit.
Let me-
And
let-
he
Let me
is
just,
overburdened.
and there's a new public works director coming in next week, so anyway, the idea is that, they finally sent the letters out to, Hewlett Packard, and Hewlett Packard's like, well, we wanna make sure this tree needs to come down, so they asked that other, I think I gave you that one paper by Michael, I don't remember his name, is that it?
Is that the
Anyway,
same?
Michael Young.
so they wanted a second opinion, because they said, well, we don't wanna pay for a tree if it's not coming down or whatever. So they got the second opinion. That was a gentleman hired by them, Michael O'Brien is his name? Sorry, I should have made a copy of that, and I don't.
Michael Young.
Young. And so he was like the second arborist that said, yes, the tree needs to come down. So then that's when I don't remember exactly the date that the letter was issued. It was April or something of this year, that the tree was approved to be cut down. And then obviously they told Hewlett Packard to hire somebody to do this. But they didn't tell us the date or anything. When you came talking to me at that counter on Tuesday morning, I didn't know anything about this tree.
sad.
I didn't know it was
That's
being cut
just-
down.
That's just pathetic.
Well,
I'm
whatever.
sorry.
The idea is that I didn't know that was happening. That's why I was like, whoa, what's going on? So anyway, and that leads up to all I knew about it up to that point. And then when the tree had been partially cut, that's why we were like, well, this is definitely this is a scary situation here. We're totally liable if something happens now, definitely. And so that's why we said, okay, let's
and just to
have the
be
tree.
clear, for the record, I take full responsibility. So I just want that to be really clear. And I will always err on the side of human life before any other life. That's my job for as long as I'm here. October 29th is my last day. And then you can take all of this up with someone else. But I have
that's
no,
interesting.
I
Okay.
have no problem accepting responsibility for this. And that being said, like Steve, the first I heard about this was a frantic phone call from Deborah Padovan saying, we've got this problem and, we've got somebody down here screaming and yelling at us. So that's the first I heard
I
of
didn't
it.
start by screaming and yelling. I
Okay.
start by talking calmly, and I wasn't heard. And I think there is a bit of conflict of interest with the Deborah Padovan and Steve Padovan thing going on here a bit, and I will bring that up as well. Carl, are you a hired position? Or are you appointed?
I'm appointed by the
Okay.
city council. I am the
Okay.
city manager
Okay.
at this point.
And so your term is ending.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, I'm retiring.
Okay.
So I guess, so if you wanted to back up, that's to say, well, I didn't hear you take accountability. I'm taking accountability.
Thank
But
you.
I want to go forward and say, let's fix our process. And again, that's normally, we look at what we have, we take a look at our existing policy and say, all right, how did it fail? What additional measures do we need to have in this to make sure we don't have a repeat of this situation?
Carl, is this on the city council as a consent item?
It typically, is presented to the council, but we need to research that. It could have
I
been.
just wondered if it was something that people overlook. Because
what I
it
can
goes
say
on
is-
consent calendars and a
Yeah.
lot of times.
What I
you
can
don't
say is
get
something,
that clarity.
there was no in-depth discussion by the city council. This was even,
It wasn't talked about.
yeah, it wasn't.
As far as I know, it was never discussed.
So a couple of things. One is, so I think in terms of going forward, there's definitely seems to be an issue of transparency, of just being open about these important things, and particularly perhaps going around, and it sounds like you're already doing an assessment of what are the kind of important trees in particular that are the town's responsibility. Obviously, if it's on somebody's private property, outside of roadways and I assume public access areas, then it's not, the town isn't the primary one focused on that, but doing, kind of identifying what those trees are and what's that?
Notifying the citizens of the town.
Which trees are the ones that are of major concern, and making sure that
Right.
that is open, and that people realize that, neighbors and the community.
Putting notices on the actual trees.
Yeah, and
I
two,
mean,
They're
They could
tagged.
have a permit.
They are.
they're not notified.
They're not
tagged as in
notified, not
numbers
anything that I would recognize
as a
What if
as
that-
a
concern.
citizen.
Something to do now would be to put out a card to all residents saying what the town's policy is and that these trees are evaluated each year. And that if a tree is on your property and is evaluated, that we will notice you the condition and what it is. So nobody knows really what the tree policy is in town.
Well, this seems to me to be a
Yeah,
pretty
that's-
clear
that
policy.
is something, but.
That's pretty clear, and to just
But
tell people that this
see,
is the
but
policy
how
because
mu-
this didn't
How
happen.
many people really, see, if you're
Do you have
involved
the
in
full
town, you
municipal
know
code
about
handy
it.
with you?
But we could
Oh, yeah.
send out
Why
a
don't you go get
notice
it? Let's go get the
about,
full thing.
a notice that says that we evaluate the street trees, so-and-so. So people will be aware of it, because a lot of times, people are aware of it right after an accident
Right.
or an incident happens, and we don't, then nothing happens for a number of years.
So I understand your concern with human life after so much of been cut, but I just cannot understand why we weren't notified before the arborist came out. And how, excuse me, my French, in the hell you got an arborist to come out with less than 12 hours or 20 hours notice? I don't even
Come
know.
on, we have arborists that we.
Yeah,
can
that you
call.
work with and that you're connected with and that aren't independent of agendas of administration in the town.
We didn't remove the tree. You're saying, well, you're absolving the Packard Foundation from this.
No, we're not absolving. No.
Okay.
That's my next stop. No. That's
Okay.
my next stop. The Packard Family Foundation on the front of their website says that they stand for the environment and stuff. That's my next stop. But
I will say this. Likely they received a notice from the town saying, this tree is not in good shape.
well,
We
they
need-
did,
we
and
need
they
to
asked
deal
for
with it."
another
They had the
arborist.
report,
Yeah.
All right.
and
So.
I'm not absolving them, but I also
Okay.
don't want you to pass your
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
well, no,
we're-
but that's where this was going, and you
we're
can lead.
agreed.
I'll give this recording to everybody, and you can listen back.
Sure. You're welcome to do that. This, I don't know why this arborist is not satisfactory to you, but we've used them for a number of years. They don't ever do any work for us, like tree removal work, so I would say, yeah, we're mindful that there could be a conflict. If the same company we hire to evaluate trees is then also then given the job to remove the tree, it seems like that's a conflict. That doesn't exist here. And usually that's, like, they did a pretty, what we thought, not being experts, seemed like an in-depth analysis.
Yeah.
That they really
But
examined.
again,
we're not experts either, so we need to rely on people who are. But the comments that I got back were, one, that this is not a certified consulting arborist. Two, the assessment that they're using is an outdated assessment. There's a more current one that looks more holistically and qualitatively at the tree, and that's not the case in this report. So those are the things I guess I call into question about it. And the what I had heard from Steve, the arborist, on whatever that came the next day, what he had said was that it should come down because it's already been so compromised, which obviously was because of the actions that were taken, prior to looking at. So to me, it's more, and to us, it's more about, okay, instead of looking at this through the lens of just liability, but how can we preserve this?
And the mayor
How
was.
can we move forward in terms of how we look at the trees from a preservation standpoint? And yes, we're concerned about human life as well, and
Yes.
we're also concerned about the life
Yes.
of these,
Of the planet.
in this case, of this magnificent tree that's been there
Yes.
for 100 years, and could have been potentially for quite a bit more. I don't know.
So that's where I do think it's an issue of process.
Mhm.
You're citing a very specific section of code, and by just taking that section, it's like, that right away alarm bells go off, because when people do that, it's like, no, let's look at the context of the whole passage, and I'm looking at this, it's about heritage trees, when really that was an oak tree, and then heritage oaks is covered under Article 3,
Mhm.
and it's covered from 12-2, 301 to 307. So I'm just saying this is heritage trees, and it has that tree would have had to have been designated by the Environmental Design and Protection Committee, and it's a different process. If I look at the heritage oak tree process, I believe that the staff did follow the process in terms of making it a determination that the tree was an immediate danger to persons or property. And so if you want to change that, that can be done. It has to be, it would be, you would look at, again, what's existing in terms of our heritage oak ordinance,
Mhm.
decide, well, what needs to be changed, or what do we think should be changed?
Well, so can you make a copy of all that for us?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and Carol doesn't seem to agree with your.
No, a heritage, that we do have any tree that's over 12 inches oak is considered heritage, but then we have a special heritage designation where we can designate the oak as a heritage oak tree for the town and put a plaque on it. And we just put 2 plaques, but one of the plaques is wrong up in Burn Preserve.
The wrong
because
Latin name.
in 1983, those two trees in Burn Preserve were dedicated as heritage oaks.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that gives a little bit stronger access to the trees. They will have to definitely would have to come through council. And I question one because it does have a cavity in it, and it's a valley oak, and when we went up in the spring, it didn't look too good. So I asked the staff to reevaluate it before we put a sign on it, because I didn't want us to look foolish. And they felt the oak, even with the cavity, I guess, was okay. And so the signs are up, but they both said coastal live oak, and one's a coastal live oak and one's valley oak.
Yeah.
So we have to get the signs.
And that, and those trees, like, we can treat those differently because they're out in the middle of a preserve.
Yes.
If
Okay.
they fall, while there is a possibility somebody could get hurt, it's much less than when it's immediately by a road. So.
And which was the exact site of the tree on Old Snaky, which, I mean, I was in tears when I saw that fall,
Yeah, well,
because that's.
I don't think that was anybody but nature's.
No, that was
Right.
totally nature's, and luckily, only
Nobody-
the deer and the turkeys that would feast
That's-
under it, but we have stumps from that tree, we have oak, we collected acorns from that tree, so,
Yeah, no, trees are very special, and I spent, personally, I had a maple tree that I absolutely loved, and I spent so much money trying to keep it alive, and finally it had to be taken down. They split and they put a bar through it and things like that.
well, I mean,
So there's
honestly, this tree out here, that all that money's been spent to save the tree in the middle here, looks in way worse condition than the tree that's out there on Elena, especially before it was cut. And there was a heck of a lot of money put into that, and we actually talked to an arborist who gave the recommendations for that tree and said actually they weren't followed by the town, and it would be in a lot better condition if that had been followed.
Well, if it was McClenahan, they implemented the recommendations, so I don't know what they're talking about to say we didn't follow the recommendations.
Well, I purposely wasn't like pointing a finger on that, so.
I don't know anything about.
But I'm just, it was
money.
really shocking to me to be here in town and look at that tree.
We know that
And
tree's
all-
not doing well, and it's probably has more to do with the impact to the root zone, but,
Mhm.
that tree gets a lot of attention by arborists, primarily McClenahan, and anything they've told us to do, we've done. So, I mean, if there's something we're not doing, we'd love to hear about it and do it.
Okay.
So, yeah, it sounds like you appreciate it and understand in terms of moving forward, want to look at how we do things more transparent. I don't know if there's things, if you'd have recommendations in terms of either things that need to be changed in the municipal code to ensure that, or in terms of staff procedures, or how we actually go about, ensuring that this doesn't happen again in terms of, not notified, and if there is a way to look at, how we really look at this through a preservation lens and as balanced with the liability one.
Yeah, I think we'll have to start with an amendment to the ordinance, because, I'm just gonna read the notice to neighbors and issuance of permits section. It just says the town shall mail written notice of the removal permit application to owners of all abutting property, except when the reason for the application is that the heritage oak is dead, diseased beyond reclamation, hazardous, or crowded such that good horticultural practices dictate its removal. So, and then if there's no protest within 10 days, then we issue the permit. So it may be that there
But there was a protest.
Well,
Not from when the notice.
There was
Well,
no-
but the
yeah, there
notices
was
didn't
no
go
notice.
out.
Right.
Well,
But
but
as
it's-
soon as the community was noticed, there was a protest.
But I'm saying is it says except when the reason for the application is dead, disease beyond reclamation, or hazardous.
Yeah.
So it was, now, and it also said, if I had an issue, it's not with Steve, it's like, I would have, if I'm gonna take the heat for something, I'd like to know about it first. I'd like to go into a situation eyes wide open, like I'm gonna get blasted for this, so at least I know about it. I didn't know about this, until Tuesday that there was plans to remove this, that tree. I had,
So that seems like an issue within the town.
yes,
Town
it's
administration.
organizationally, it's an
to
issue
be dealt with.
organizationally that there's an issue there that I think has been fixed, but I would just say that,
And just to be clear, the issues I have with Steve are more to the way he treated me and the situation and the town with disregard in the movements of this situation.
okay. All right. So I appreciate that. And I have to somehow separate the problems. Though.
I'm great, but you brought him up again, so I'm just
so
addressing that.
I just wanted to be clear that I'm not pointing.
I know you're not. It's totally clear that you're not. But I just am telling you,
Yes.
I'm just clarifying for you so you can hear me.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying, and I am actually making a differentiation. So
Yes.
Steve is out of this conversation. We're talking
Okay.
about this code section of the town. That has
Yes.
nothing to do with him.
Yes. And so that's what I would suggest. I mean, it's
That's where
something-
we're
it's
headed.
Something we can move forward is to bring this section to the, let's see, I guess we've got the Open Space Committee and the Environmental Design
we
Committee.
sort of,
Yeah,
we're sort
if I
of,
could just jump in.
Yeah.
And, obviously there seems to be two issues here, and the issue that pertains to me is more about what do we do going forward versus what may have, what
Correct.
issues and discussions happened in the past. And typically something like this, when we realize there's an ordinance that needs some improvement or a process that needs improvement, as this tree has proven to us, the committees usually work on it, read it the committees are, it's a wider group, it's a public group, and with public participation. And that's the best place to try and hash through some modifications of what we can do moving forward. Both the EDPC and Open Space, and I don't know, maybe the History Committee, there could be some other committees that want to have a say in this. But I did want to put a plug. Carol mentioned we do have a problem with the word heritage because it's used two different ways with two different meanings.
Yeah.
And we were trying to fix that with a tree ordinance, but the tree ordinance kind of got put on hold. And maybe this is the situation where we reinvigorate it.
Mhm.
But it would be great to advertise to the town, and maybe it's through our town newsletter, that people can designate a significant tree like the one on Elena as a history heritage tree. And Carol, I don't know.
Good to know.
It's a heritage, it's, heritage.
it's this section
Yeah,
here. See, that's,
it's very difficult because it's almost the same terminology.
yeah,
But
Yeah,
one has been
but let me
designated
just-
by the town, the other ones, it's 12 inches, it's considered, it's probably the one that's 12 inches is more impacting the building, the planning, than the heritage oak. The heritage oak is usually designated, and the history committee is supposed to keep track of the heritage oak trees and where that's in
And
the
maybe
heritage.
we should call it
tree.
a historical tree or something. Just
Something
give it
we
a
could
totally new
change
name.
a historical heritage tree, and maybe we could
Or just
say
even
the
designated heritage
the
tree.
yeah.
Because the other trees are just heritage by growth,
By
and this is a
growth,
yeah.
designated
Yeah,
heritage
mhm.
tree.
That's
It's
what's
very
different.
confusing. But, I just, yeah, I
And
just wanna
maybe
say
they
that-
should have, any heritage tree, even maybe all the trees should be designated that if we know they're over 100, 150 years old. And that way that triggers another list that the town
Yeah,
has to
just
look
just
at
like the
before they do
safety
it.
drive-by survey thing, there
Mhm.
should also be a preservation thing that moves through
Yeah.
the town and says, okay, which oaks do we want to really try to do our
To
best to
keep.
preserve in this town?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, and last year we had the fight and we were saying that the committees were asking for too many trees to be planted because of the fire danger. And we've used the trees in the past to mitigate the homes because they didn't want architectural review in the town. So when you take a big home on a hillside or any place that is very exposed, what do? You use the trees to mitigate the house. So, there's a balance here someplace. So this is how things are done, and sometimes we don't hit the right balance.
Mhm. Okay.
And, a lot of us would have liked to have seen architectural review,
Mhm.
because that way you can really get the homes built into the terrain, and then you don't have to do
yeah,
so much
we
landscaping.
may get to that. We may get to that, because that's traditionally what we've used is, property owners have been given broad discretion in what their homes look like,
Mhm.
with the idea that we could, then screen it with landscaping.
Landscaping,
And
right.
now with fire danger, we're realizing that's
Right.
not gonna work.
Right.
So,
Lots of issues here.
Yeah,
Kim,
there's
was
a lot
there-
of issues. I mean, it's just, if you have one issue here and you have another issue
Yeah.
here, and trying to get a balance between the two, it's really hard.
Yeah, that's why we call our organization Appreciating Balance.
Yeah.
Kit,
So
was there
that is
something
what
else you
needs to
had
be.
to say as well?
Well, I was just wondering, I just want to point out that typically this kind of thing, when a problem arises, is thrown to the committees and the committees welcome public input so that we can figure out what the solution is.
Okay.
I encourage you to participate or send a letter or
Yeah.
whatever. But again, the focus is what are we going to do forward, not what went wrong. I mean, not personnel issues and who
Yeah.
got insulted. I think that's not productive for like our open space meeting.
So what I hear is kind of looking at changes to the municipal code that make it clearer in terms of what needs to be done in terms of transparency, notification of neighbors and community, right? And it seems like there's this other issue in terms of the heritage oaks and how that designation is, or
Yeah.
how we really
District.
focus on these quintessential, whatever you call them.
There's some
the-
gorgeous
the-
things, and
The
thing
historic
is-
oaks.
that we've gone into
Yeah, and-
homes where people have said, yes, they were designated, and then, in all fairness, the staff has not been able to follow up, sometimes because they don't have the time to follow it up, because there is a procedure, and when the people, they have to sign papers saying they're gonna take care of the oak, and then they have to allow the town to come in every so often to look at that, to be sure the oak is all right,
Mhm.
and that they've kept it. We could also explore the idea that if people put this designation on heritage oaks, that maybe they somehow can tie it into the Mills Act, I don't know, like we did for the Hills Brothers property, and give them a little bit of, then they negotiate with the county for a deduction in their property taxes. So that would probably be one way of incentivizing people to designate oaks. I don't know, because I didn't even know the town had a mills that we could even do what you did, and I'm so happy that you did that for the houses. But I've had it on the history, I'm also on the history committee agenda for about 5 years, and nobody ever told me that we could do that. And I'm really pleased that that was done, and maybe we can carry that over to trees. I have no idea.
On that, I guess and that's the biggest picture for me and us is, how do we, as a world really, but how, in a community, how do we really value these trees? How do we, to Carl's point, I understand right now the way the system is constructed, that, as Steve said very directly, if I know there's a tree with an issue, then liability is my only major, that's my concern, is liability. Anybody getting hurt, any property, any individual. So there's no standing for the trees in this system, that what is their overall import to the community, to our livelihood, to the, we're in a global crisis right now. How do we as a community help support that bigger picture? And even in the arborist report, I'll go back to that. He says in the arborist report that the only way to mitigate any liability and any damage is to get rid of the tree, which is the same for any car, this
airplanes,
building, anything. Of course, trees are going to fall. Trees
people
are going to hurt
get killed.
People are going to get killed. That sucks.
Airplanes
we
crash.
don't want that. And obviously as a town, you don't want to know about something that you could have avoided. But at the same time, we could have avoided taking down this 200, 300-year-old tree, and in a way safely, that allowed the very lowest risk for any individual or any cars, all that stuff. So, I don't know in this case, but at least if we had looked at it perhaps through that lens of what could be done to save this. If you look at it now, hasn't even been trimmed back from the wires. There's very little pruning, very little trimming that had been done. So it could have been done differently. And I want to see, so I'll pose the question, if you're looking at a broader issue in terms of, I brought some information. Santa Monica has put it in a resolution that, we recognize that our ecosystem is essential to our livelihood here and in the world. And we as a town will support that. So we will look at decisions that we make and how we deal with environmental issues and deal with individual trees to the overall ecosystem, how we deal with mountain lions, how we deal with the watersheds, from a holistic standpoint, that this is an important asset. This natural asset has standing in law, and yes, it may, by doing something, it may somehow cost somebody a life, but as in the grander picture, it's saving and allowing us a thriving life for all of us. So how do we do that? Is that a council thing? Is that a committee thing? How do we look at a broader?
It has to start from the bottom and move up through the planning commission to the council. And
Committees like both environmental design and open space are.
And see, I forgot to ask Peter to put this on our agenda. He had sent something out, well, I guess it was on Tuesday he sent it out, so I don't think this is on our agenda for our Tuesday meeting. And we meet at 5:45 on Zoom. And if you'd like to attend, you could make a presentation from the floor.
Sure.
Regarding this issue.
Thank you.
And you could probably, you said it's on your agenda?
Yes, it is on our agenda.
So you can also.
What's on the agenda is just the discussion about this particular tree, but I think what we really want to talk about is where do we need to modify our policies, both in terms of information, because the Open Space Committee, we were not informed that this tree was coming down, and we would like to know in advance trees are deemed to be unsafe. So there is some kind of review process. So there's both communication to the committees and the public, and also just a question for our guests is, if you had known about this, being able to designate trees as being historical heritage before any of this happened,
Yes.
would you have pursued that for this?
Absolutely, 100%.
But you, being here, you were not aware that this
Nope.
designation existed?
No.
Like seeing the one in Town Hall has a sign on it and you didn't?
No, that was the first
know?
time I saw that one. I don't come to town hall very often. This is the first time I've ever handled an issue directly. It's not anything that...
One of our biggest frustrations is trying to get through to the public and how to communicate and how to, unfortunately, it always seems like it takes a crisis for people to be aware, and it's always a challenge for us to try and communicate.
But here, I get that, Kit. In this case, we're talking about the trees that are on town property or the town's responsibility, public access ways. Obviously, if there's trees, beautiful trees on any individual property, then yes, those property owners have to take responsibility. But in this case, it's the town's trees.
Well, actually, that's a fine distinction. In other words, the town would have to decide that corporately. The council, the residents, in other words, do we offload the responsibility for street trees onto the town completely? It's probably a burden greater than the town could absorb. When I say the town, it's like everybody pulls their tax dollars together and we have this little pot of money to do stuff with.
So I have a tree. I have a tree exactly in mind that I want designated as a heritage oak. It's the tree on Moody that provides the canopy as you drive into Moody. It's gorgeous, and it's on the side. And I looked at that tree since this and went, wow, that tree falls. This road is as busy as that road sometimes, and it's got kids on it and runners, especially with COVID. We've had tons of people on that road. We have cars. And if that falls, it could damage. But that is an epic tree. Yeah. And
too, they've noticed Moody Road, that the fire, who's doing it? It's the fire district. District is coming through Moody Road and going to be pruning the trees.
Yeah, they do that.
And so I told a friend who's very concerned about it to try to call somebody and talk to them ahead of time and see what they can work out with their trees, because they're very precious. I know it's really weird. I love the land. And
it's not weird to me at all.
But it's very precious to a lot of people, and it is one of the things that
this town stands for. Town stands for. That's the emblem on our town.
And it's the beauty of the town too. The canopies touching, and you're going under the trees. Nothing is more beautiful. And when I had tree police, I'm going back to myself, and my tree people said, well, your canopies aren't fire regulated because they weren't high enough for a fire truck to come in, that they were able to cut them up enough to keep some of the canopies. So it's really hard. It's a balance. What do we do? Do we strip the town and say we're fireproof? And then the other things is the trees are usually standing and the houses aren't when you look at the fire pictures.
Yeah.
But
and I was gonna say, Mother Nature will do this for us. On one level, Mother Nature is gonna self-select, what lives and what doesn't. But it's also that happens with babies and people who die early But to me, the example of this tree is, and I know that's why this has become so passionate to me, is I just took my 105.5-year-old grandmother into my house, who is totally with it, showers by herself, all these things, and not to give a third option, to just say life or death, to not give the option of cancer or alternative healing or alternative ways that serve the greater community. That's what we're looking for, the third option. And that's what I said to Steve from the very beginning, please give us the time to evaluate the third option with this tree. And so this is opened up. This tree may sadly be sacrificed in that mission.
Yes, and maybe we'll save the other trees.
Yes. And she knows that,
has a good outcome.
Yes, exactly. And that's what we are committed to in this process. And also, as you brought up, we also have a recommendation to ask for at least 2 trees to be built in that vicinity of Valley Oaks, decent sized specimens, whether they're paid
Do
for.
you want valley or coast? Valley oaks are the ones that lose the leaves, coast are evergreens, and they stay.
I mean,
green.
I don't know enough about the environmental impact, but I would like Valley personally.
Okay,
But that's just,
Yeah,
because the valley oak went
This is
down.
a valley oak.
Yeah.
yeah, no, and
Yeah.
it's,
we need more valley oaks.
yeah,
Okay,
They're less susceptible to sudden death.
yep.
all right.
So Valley Oak would be my preference, and that's the tree that, is probably going to lose its life. And then our other recommendation, and Randy has a picture here. This is just a picture that my mother shared because she saw it coming. But there is a wonderful carver up close to McClenahan who carves,
Oh, yes, out of the thing.
she has
Okay.
some wood and feathers carved that he's done. He's available. Also, I've talked to Jill Jensen, who backs the support of all this. And
Not necessarily that exactly.
yeah. No. It's just the
An
idea.
of.
And it may
can
not be
this
able to
an
be
art?
where it is because of the proximity to the
Yeah.
road, but if we took that wood and made a monument of
That
a
would be
tree
great.
or something, and then Jill also knows who is related to the Packard family. He's married to one of the Packards, Eric, somebody who lives up on the property there behind the gate, who made a tree out of the eucalyptus that was
bench.
taken. What?
A bench, made a bench.
No, he made a table.
You said a
Yeah.
tree.
Oh, sorry. He
Well,
made
you
a
could-
table out of the eucalyptus trees that were taken over off Arrastradero to make the bike path. It's a gorgeous table because he said he could make a bench out of. There's
That
so
would be
much wood from this tree
fantastic.
that we could put off on the path there that could be designated there, with a plaque on the bench for the tree. So yes, for sure, this tree needs to be honored in the sacrifice it has made for the greater good of this community. And sadly, I think, but what we would like to ask time for is that this arborist, if you want to talk more about him or.
Dave Muffley, he's based in Santa Barbara right now. He's coming up. We're meeting with him at 5:00 under the oak.
Anybody's
on
welcome to join
Wednesday.
us.
You're welcome to join.
Okay.
But just to get his perspective.
Today,
And
No, next Wednesday. Next
Okay.
Wednesday.
He was the guy that Steve Jobs appointed as his arborist for the.
Is Dave Muffley?
Dave Muffly.
okay, I'll try.
Mary J.
He's-
Marcus connected
You
us
can
to
let
him.
me know
He's
the time.
Yeah.
consulting
Well,
St. Carlos
and
now.
because-
and
Can I get
Oakland.
your email? I don't.
Yeah.
And
I
and
can-
Yeah,
I
just
think
write it down.
Wednesday at 5.
Wednesday 5:00. Yeah. So, but
Because
I-
the more we know about
Right.
Yeah.
the trees, the more information.
And he
the
may
better
also
off
be
we'll-
a great
Yeah.
consultant resource for the town. He's currently working for San Carlos
I think St.
and
Carlos and Oakland.
On this issue.
Not,
And
not individual
oh.
trees, but kind of
Oh,
as
he's a more-
like
yeah.
how holistically how do we really preserve and
Yeah. And
and,
it's,
deal
and
with
it's
the
very
issues.
hard because, they come in when they come in for their homes, people will say, oh, we see these trees and we think they're beautiful, and then the arborist comes in and says they're sick. And we go, and that's sort of what they did to mine, so you don't know what to believe. I mean, the
Right.
tree is flourishing, and they're saying the tree is sick.
Yeah.
And it's been flourishing, so.
And the reality is
you
most
don't know.
of the oaks in our town are sick to one
Or they're
extent.
stressed.
Or
Well,
another.
they're
They're stressed by
yeah,
the
now,
by
because
the-
of
yeah.
drought. But oaks don't like a lot of water.
No, they
so
don't.
they're probably on less
But we're losing
stress.
more. I mean, I've lived here
Yes.
for a long time, and this is the most oaks I've ever seen us lose.
Yeah.
So it's not that we
It's-
don't care for the safety. We don't. But this tree, the branch that I took home from the clippings of Tuesday with all these gorgeous acorns that I have in our living room. This was one of the healthier oaks. I mean, I know it's been all these things, and it has all these things, and it's
there
been
are
hit.
some issues with
There
it.
are some issues with it, but yeah, the whole thing makes me really sad. It makes me really sad, and I apologize for my part in making this personal. I don't mean to make this personal to you, Steve, and I take accountability for that. But at the same time, the person in this position who I was supposed to be interacting with did not honor things that were made and made statements about me or things that were untrue. And I was the one fighting for the oak. I was the one who stopped. I was the one. My husband has jumped in here and helped. And so, you know, it's not, Kit, I understand, like, we don't want to do a personal thing and this isn't about me, but this issue came up for a reason.
Okay, so,
I think basically we have to go on, and really, I wish the two of you would think about, you could each join a different committee, so you can go back and forth, but we do need young people.
We're young these days in this town, huh?
Yeah,
we know.
to serve on these committees and keep the heritage of the town going.
Yeah.
And I'm delighted to see that you're so passionate about
I
it.
appreciate that, and I really appreciate that, and honestly, I think this whole process didn't work, and so I'm looking at from a bigger picture of, you know, maybe the committee thing, maybe there's a different process all the way around.
Yeah.
So Randy and I have started an organization called Appreciating Balance, and we welcome all community, anyone, to have their input, and we will start working from there, and we will consider, and I really appreciate your offer. We're also going to be, we've already talked to Hidden Villa, we're going to be working with Hidden Villa related to this. Hidden Villa is going through some major changes, and I think getting back to more the Duveneck
Oh, good.
principles, which we've been, Randy and I have been,
Listen, I went to the meeting when that was
yeah,
crushed. And
yeah, we've been crushed. But, you know, Chris stepped
that was the
down
end of it. Okay.
in between, interestingly, on Wednesday, in between the cutting days, he
Okay.
announced his resignation. So,
That's good news.
yeah. And so
maybe
things are
we
changing.
can get back to basics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And toward that though, happy to, you know, understand what's in terms of the process, in terms of the languaging, we're happy to, you know, take a look at that. And,
Could we get a copy
and
of
talk
that
about it.
code?
Yeah.
And Kit, when is your meeting, and are we welcome at that?
It's next Wednesday, the 11th at 9 a.m.
Okay. And is it Zoom as well?
And I'm sorry, what was that?
Is it Zoom as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Print out
I
the
think
one online.
last month was our first in-person
Or send
meeting,
us
but I
out.
think
Yeah, send
because
us
of the
out.
whole Delta
Okay.
variant
Okay.
stuff,
Oh, you
I think we're
print that.
I was gonna just copy it.
That area.
Okay.
There's always a Zoom option.
Okay.
Um,
Thanks, Kit.
And I just want to say that I got involved with the open space because of my frustration with creeks. So
Yeah.
this is how people get involved, and this is the way to make permanent change. And the town is run by
that would be
a
good
lot
just
of,
to
it's run by
include that,
volunteers,
please.
and so if you want to see it change, you gotta jump in. And I'm also excited about changes at Hidden Villa, and I'm also good friends with Jill Jensen, and
Great.
But I think Chris stepping down and getting someone new in there, I think is very promising.
Well, and I just met with Lynn Rivas, who's the new associate director, this morning, and had a really encouraging talk with her, and things are already changing. So
And that's good, because, you know what, I was there when the gal said to her, that because it's been a community thing, the horsemen were very
right.
involved.
No, I
with
remember. I mean, I
practice.
was at the horse shows. You know.
Yeah. And they said, well, they didn't care about, and then the point was brought up at the time, well, the community is the one who's supporting Hidden Villa, not only in physical activities,
But financial.
in the money. And
Yeah.
she says, I'm sorry, she says, we don't need that money anymore, we're getting rid of corporate dollars.
Mhm.
Then
What meeting
they
was
never
that?
got, it was, years ago, when it was after the Duveneck. So this
Oh.
Dana was still alive.
Uh-huh.
And then Liz Dana said something about it being her family place, and I felt about this thing.
Wow.
But,
Yeah, that was.
it
I wasn't
was,
involved.
they,
Then.
you know,
Thanks.
that was
Thank
the
you.
time where they almost kicked out the horses completely, and you can't ride through their time.
Yeah.
So I cut off my donations. to-
Well, I
Yeah,
just
there's-
told Liz that
it's
this morning.
all
I said,
relevant, and then
Yeah.
heritage oak.
Yeah, thanks.
That was,
Cool.
So,
So
so I'm glad you
appreciate
did.
it, and so I guess the process is, I'll follow up too with Carol and Kit and kind of send our thoughts and some kind of background information.
And then the
Would-
following month, we can put it on our agendas.
Yeah.
Or maybe form a subcommittee between the two committees, so we can go back and forth. We have a Brown Act that we have to be very careful of, so we can't, three of us if we can't have a quorum
Mhm.
at a meeting unless it is.
3 or more.
Publicized meeting.
Oh, right.
We have to be very careful on that.
And just in full disclosure, we sent Kavita and copied Lynn Swan and a couple of the other, Jill Jensen, Denise Del Carlo, and Ann Dewey, just that we were meeting with you all today and our findings. It's what Randy's been referencing, our findings about the Oaks so far, and also we'll invite them to be there on Wednesday. So we would ask that you postpone the cutting of the tree until Wednesday's.
It's fair enough. I feel like
We've done what we can in terms of, at least, we don't want people on that path, you know, it's just like averages, right? If you're on foot, you're gonna be the slowest.
Mhm.
So, I mean, somebody passing by in a car, like, and you know, the tree could be there for another 2 years. It's so hard to know. And trees that look perfectly healthy fall over. I mean, I think you were alluding to that earlier, that there's a certain amount of randomness that is beyond our control, but
There's a lot of randomness that's beyond our
Yeah.
control, to be totally honest. We sit here in this
Call
room and
life.
try to do this.
right. But there are things like this where, you know, when a situation is documented, like, oh, you know, the tree has got substantial
Mhm.
structural damage,
Mhm.
even if it's thriving up top,
Mhm.
and if somebody is hurt. The lawsuits, I mean, not to mention the life, but
Yeah, we understand.
Okay.
We understand, and we came in here saying this from the beginning has never been about trying to not consider that as
Okay.
equal as the preservation of the tree. It can be equal. It can be equally considered,
Yeah.
and we really feel in this situation it was not.
It's aired, it
It was
seems
pushed
to be the
through.
shift is on, that it's largely, the biggest weight is just on averting any liability, so that's where we feel it's out of balance, so.
Then, can this go on either this council's or next council's agenda
Well,
about getting, in
the-
case the tree goes down, which I think is probably inevitable, getting a replacement tree?
Well, we're planning to be at the council meeting and have talked to Kavita
Well,
about
if
that,
it's
the
on,
main
they
council.
They can't take action on presentations from the floor, but if it's on the agenda, then the council
Okay,
can
we'll
now
follow up
take
with
action.
Kavita about that then.
And
No,
I
it-
don't know
it'll be on-
whether
it'll be on the
it's
agenda.
appropriate for this committee or
Mhm.
September's meeting.
Well,
But-
what's gonna go on the agenda, this one in August, it would not be a set of policy changes, I
No,
doubt
no.
that you're gonna have it all worked out in a
Mm-mm.
matter of days, but if there is a specific request, you mentioned possibly using some of the wood toward a sculpture, or,
And the planting of a tree.
and a planting of, you know,
Yeah,
a certain number of
tree.
valley oaks. I think if that is presented to the council, I can tell you now, I'll put it on the agenda, and the council can make a decision as, I think they would say yes. I don't see why they wouldn't. I would like to, Wednesday, yes, we are agreed that we're not gonna try to do any more work on the tree until at least we've had Dave Muffley review it Wednesday, 5 p.m. And, you know, let's see what he has to say. Let's go from
And one
there.
of the things that would be interesting, since the tree has really been compromised, is what might we have done to keep the tree?
Right.
So give us an
Exactly.
idea of the process, and when you
Yeah.
think you have a good tree,
Yeah.
but it isn't, what can we do to maybe save it? And
Yeah.
that would be right now more relevant.
Yes.
Correct, and I think that is Dave's perspective. He has seen, you know, what we've sent him, and his general view is that probably at this point, it's, you know.
I mean,
it's
we've
beyond
made peace with it. This
saving,
tree will probably be
but it
sacrificed.
is
So
the
just so you
bigger-
know, it's
the bigger future.
but
the bigger
we
picture.
want the opportunity for him
Yeah.
to come look at it.
And
Yes.
maybe the town can have a procedure, if there's a diseased tree, and if there's a process that can be used to possibly
That's why
save
we're
the
here.
tree,
Yeah,
then maybe that that could be put into
Yeah.
place.
exactly.
But
The-
those are the kind of
There's,
things.
I mean, one other thing to keep
Okay.
in mind, Carol, is like, I can't think of the last time we've had this happen. I mean, really, it happens very frequently. I mean, typically recommendations that are coming out through our windshield survey are not, a lot of times it is trimming. It's pruning way back, or there's cabling, it's rare that something like
I mean, another question is why wasn't it trimmed back from the power lines? Because honestly, that's a lot of the biggest safety concerns with the arborists that we've talked to, is that it's closer to power lines. That seems to be more of a safety. And honestly, if you guys want to cut something, you should probably cut the limbs that are next to the power line.
I don't know, whatever the tree trimmer started doing.
I don't know why they did that.
But I don't even know why before, if that was a tree you were worried about since 2017, why that wasn't flagged. And I'm not saying you guys, I'm just talking about the town, because I know you're appointed and I've just found out how to just started this position. But I'm saying this is an administrative issue of why wasn't that tree flagged to be like, it needs to be cared for, because it is at risk. And
That's what we have to do.
And so I appreciate you guys calling this. I did request at one time that we sit down, I think this was on Tuesday, that we'd be allowed to sit down with you and actually bring the Packard people in here too, which they have just totally bowed out of this since they went back on their word. And like I said, that's my next step, because but
That
that's
would be between you and them.
we will. So but I'm just telling you, and I understand.
And I think it should be clarified, and just could be in the newsletter, road right-of-ways and the responsibility of the owners of trees in the road right-of-way versus the town's responsibility.
And let's put the heritage thing in the town newsletter. The town newsletter is lovely. I read that all the time. It's a lovely, lovely letter.
So we can get some publicity that way, and let people know that it exists.
Yeah.
It comes up every once in a while, and then, people.
It exists,
forget
and who do
about
you
it.
go to? Who do you go to request that?
Mhm.
To request
Well,
what?
there have been articles on the oaks.
Okay.
And the heritage tree in town hall was featured.
Okay.
There's about every 5 years, there's an article on oaks. I don't know
Okay.
when the next cycle.
Well, it seems like it's a good time to put that in there.
Mhm.
Yeah,
again.
although there's a whole group of people who want a lot of trees cut down because of fire. So I know we're like in a catch-22.
Yeah.
We need the trees to combat climate change, but climate change is making these trees' survival much less. I mean, I think a lot of these oak trees are dying because of climate change, and a lot of trees are being removed because of fire risk. So we're really in a
But it is about balance, like Carol has brought up many times in this meeting. There is a balance to be found, and
Well, you have to have trees because you have a lot of erosion, and if you don't have the trees to hold the soil back, you're going to have landslides.
Yeah.
So it's so hard.
Yeah, to me, I don't end this for myself here, which is that there's things have been, we was way too concerned about our homes than we are concerned
about the
than
planet
we're concerned about the planet and the overall environment.
and our
We're
material.
willing to cut down trees that have a greater asset long-term to protect, an asset that we probably shouldn't have been there, that we put $1 million or multi into, that shouldn't have been in that position to begin with, but
Well,
just because there's so much crazy money here. And
Yeah, that's
Anyway.
I think one of you should, or both of you should join in our committees, because
Well,
we need people like you.
thank you. I appreciate
you.
your
Appreciate
invitations and
Yeah,
encouragement, so thank you.
I really encourage you to get involved in committees. I have another meeting.
Yeah, we gotta go.
All right.
The farmer's market.
Planning commission.